Mr. Vice Chancellor and everyone who is here, thank you so much for coming. In getting to know the Vice Chancellor and Minister as well, he's one of the great thinkers on how industries will evolve. And in his writings, which have affected a lot of people's thinking in America, he charts a course of modernization of what are traditionally called old industries, which neither the Chancellor nor I believe are old industries. Your vision has had a huge impact, and I agree with very much of it. So thank you very much. So when you invited me here, I had only one choice but to say yes. I think that one of the things to say about Germany is that you all are very tough on yourselves, and Germany is doing well. And Mr. Vice Chancellor, I think you're one of a small group of people who've made it so. So thank you on behalf of all of your citizens. So I'd like to speak about innovation and then address some of the questions that everyone has on their mind. Innovation is a process that's been going on forever. And I'm happy to be called the optimist, by the way, because I think the facts support my position, and I'm clear. When someone somewhere figured out tools that could help people live better, this is because of innovation. And it's a process filled with dreamers, all right, and with doers of equal measure, people who have a dream of what they can do, they set out goals, and then they make them happen. It's a process that it's a part of being human. Think of it as from the Gutenberg printing press to Stephenson's rocket train. These are all part of our history that we benefit from today. No one is anti-innovation, no one in this room for sure. So why is there a debate? Because it's messy. It's not linear, it's not smooth, it's not easy. It's full of trial and error. It tends to be inconvenient as well, and people are clearly disrupted from it. People don't wake up and say, oh, I'd like to have a technological revolution today, right? That's not what people say when they wake up in the morning. People debate, who benefits, right? The minority, the majority, the business or consumers. And the increased machines through the ages in agriculture, manufacturing, and now computing has always raised the question, well, what about the humans? What about the people? Now, it's obviously impossible to predict the future, but if you look at the Industrial Revolution, there was a massive increase in automation and a significant improvement in working standards. And working hours went from roughly 70 hours to roughly 40 hours over 150 years. And they're likely to go down in the future, our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. GDP per capita rose from $847 in 1800 to $12,700 today, accounting for inflation, with increasing literacy and life expectancy. Until the 1600s in Europe, the average person died before 30. This building was a hospital. Imagine a world with no hospitals. And think about how much better we are today because of innovation. So job creation and growth are clearly a priority for Europe, and I believe the digital economy is part of the solution here. Recent research, which I've been studying, has shown that on a net basis, jobs are created by what are called gazelles, relatively new companies that are growing quickly, right, that are inventing new things in medicine, in the digital world, in engines, in cars, in everything. According to the OECD, over 1/3 of all net new jobs created between 2001 and 2011 came from firms less than 5 years old and fewer than 50 employees. By the way, one of the great stories about Germany is this extraordinary infrastructure of small and medium businesses that are throughout the countryside of Germany that power the Industrial Revolution that the rest of us purchase from you as an exporting country. And of course, these companies then create a virtual cycle where the employees become entrepreneurs and new companies are formed. So I argue that it's our duty to our children and grandchildren, to all the people, to keep that cycle going. And as the Vice Chancellor has argued, you need a climate that fosters risk-taking, is accepting of failure, government spending on R&D and real investment in education and training, access to capital, and fast, plentiful internet access. Germany, a wonderful country, is not the leader in internet access, especially in the rural areas. This is something where you could fix this relatively quickly with a little bit more spending, right? That would have huge impact on the leverage and knowledge of your workers. We're trying to do our part. We've obviously supported the factory here in Berlin, as well as the same things in London, Paris, and Madrid. We're doing initiatives to promote jobs of one kind or another. And we've just launched Google Ventures in Europe with a fund of 80 million euros to get started to invest. And we're likely to increase that quite significantly to help fund these companies that I'm talking about. So my view is people, all of us, are the biggest winners with this increased choice and freedom. We now have basically the ability to find anything just by typing it into a computer. And it's unimaginable, the relationships, the connectivity, the sharing. We have example after example here in Germany of small businesses that now have global customers because of the internet. People could find them, they could purchase their products, they were shipped out of them. It's a huge revenue driver for them. Now, of course, there's been disruption for sure. And online competition for eyeballs and advertising euros have clearly compounded the challenges that newspapers were already having, which started really with television, competing with them. We worked hard to support that industry with their products and platforms. Each month, for example, German news publishers get 500 million clicks from Google, which people estimate are worth 12 to 16 cents per click. So it's a lot of money going into them to help them. The digital platforms have also established new opportunities for existing players. Research by the German Institute for the Economy found that 28,000 employees and 100,000 jobs were created between 2007 and 2011 in Germany with Google's help, because Google was here, and we hope to stay, obviously. And with mobile app stores like the Apple App Store and Google Play allow developers to grow their businesses. Look at WhatsApp, right? In a few years, they created a business that was purchased for on the order of $18 billion by somebody else, 600 million users. That's scale, that's impact. Now, there's a lot of discussion in Germany as to whether platforms like Google are a utility. Are we an essential facility that people are locked into? Do you have a choice? And of course, I would say that these are one of many windows onto the web. I can give you many examples. Here in Germany, Germans go to get their news. I think the top-rated newspaper is Bild, B-I-L-D, and 70% of those users go straight to Bild. They don't go through Google, they don't go through Facebook, they don't go through anybody else. Only 10% go through Google. There's lots of other examples. If you want to buy something, you can obviously use Google or Bing or Yahoo or something called Quant, which is a new French search engine. But you're much more likely to, as a consumer, to go to Amazon or Zalando. It turns out that almost a third of the people looking for things actually start on Amazon. They don't start on Google. So the concept that somehow Google is a holder or a gate is just not based on reality. So if you want travel information, right, another example, there's lots of choice. Of course, there's Google, but there's also Kayak, Apoto, or Lufthansa, Booking.com, Airbnb for hotels, Avis for your rental car, and Money Supermarket for insurance. Local information is another important category. Get me to a local plumber, right? Would you do that for Google? You're much more likely to use Yelp, TripAdvisor, Douyu, Chow, or Holiday Check. So my point is, Google is certainly not the only site being used, and in many cases, we're not the most popular. And of course, there's even mobile. I'm going to quote from The Economist, of which I'm a board member. Mobile devices have changed the way people travel the internet. Users now prefer apps to websites' home pages. That's interesting. They're moving from Google to vertical apps that are on these mobile phones. And the most interesting thing is that now a majority of searches is coming from mobile, not from desktop. Only 40% from desktop. So there's a huge shift going, which, by the way, Germans are participating in with new apps and new other products to mobile devices, whether they're Android or Apple phones. 7 out of every 8 minutes of mobile phone usage is spent within apps. And by the way, the most famous app in the world is not Google, it's Facebook. Hard for me to say, but these are the facts. We also hear a lot about network effects. It's often used as a dirty word. But in fact, I would argue that network effects make things useful. Imagine a telephone where there's no other phone to call, right? Clearly, you benefit by having everyone connected to the same network. What about a social network where you're the only person? Well, that's a pretty lonely social network. You don't have any friends. Clearly, there's a benefit, right, to having other people on this network. You don't use Google, by the way, because your friends do. You use Google because Google does something that's useful to you, different in that regard. We hear the same kinds of arguments being made about data. You don't really need data to compete online, although Google certainly has a lot, as do everybody else. When Google started, the largest player was Yahoo, much, much larger. But I would say that we had a better algorithm, we had a better approach, we had a better search engine. Our engineers just did a better job at the time, more than 10 years ago, and people switched from one to the other. Could the same thing happen? Of course. I would say to you that it's the recipe that matters more than the ingredients. We have spent an enormous amount of time trying to earn your trust. And we need to show that we are worthy stewards of your information. Privacy and security matter enormously, and these are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other, as recent hacking of, for example, the iCloud celebrities showed. That's why, for example, after the NSA and the British Secret Service attacked Google, we promoted throughout our service heavy encryption, so-called 2048-bit encryption, which is unbreakable by them or by anybody else. We focused and led the industry around something called two-factor authentication. We also want users to have the choice of deleting information that we have that they don't want us to have. If you go to your Google account, you can look at your account history. You can see what you've searched for, where you've been, essentially, all those things, the videos you've watched, and you have control. You can delete all of it, or some of it, or none of it. The user has control. You can do this the moment we're done out of this meeting, or right now if you use your mobile phones. And we, in fact, publicize how many people do this. 10 million people visited these pages between late August and early September. These are enormously popular. People care a lot about privacy, as the Vice Chancellor said. It's interesting, 200,000 turned off their YouTube search history and 80,000 turned off their location history. Now, over the last 24 hours, I've been here to Berlin, which is a city I love, and a lot of people have asked me whether Google sells personal data. And the answer is, we do not. The answer is no. We do not sell advertisers the details of what you've searched for, nor the details of the websites that you visited, or we don't sell what is in your email or the profiles in any way. We simply match advertisers to search queries. We sell advertising space. We don't sell your identity. I hope that's very clear. I want to finish by a strong message by addressing, I think, the real issue, which frankly is the United States. I think many of us, I suspect all of us, are committed Atlanticists and longtime supporters of free trade. But the relation between Germany and the United States has become strained, I think in many cases because of the Edward Snowden disclosures. I have personally met with the President of the United States to discuss this, and I have told him, and I will say to you, that the behavior of the United States government was outrageous. Just because you can do something, right? Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it. It was wrong, and it has seriously hurt more than Google, more than the existing governments. It's hurt a bond that started more than 60 years ago, and that bond is incredibly important. I think that this stoked much of this concern that somehow this digital innovation regime was going to be controlled by the Americans and not by Europe. And I think it's crucial that Europeans play up, join this party, invest in broadband, invest in universities, invest in the great talent that are in this country. I know this because Google hires them. I know that they're here. We know your people are good because we have checked. This is not, right? This is not that complicated. So, first place, in America, we need surveillance reform. We are working hard in our Senate and House, which don't do very much these days, to try to get them to actually fix these problems. They are not yet fixed, but we agree, all of us, very strongly. Second, I think U.S. companies need to continue to invest heavily in Europe for many reasons, including the fact that it's good for Europe. We have more than 9,000 employees in Europe, and we've invested more than 4 billion euros in capital in the last 4 years, all across Europe. We have large engineering sites here in Germany, no surprise, right? And a significant hiring and investment here. We need governments, including this government, to support pro-innovation policies, as Mr. Vice Chancellor, you have argued for in, I think, a very, very strong way. You have said that the digital economy can help fire up a whole new generation of German startups, and we completely agree. And I think it's central and crucial for the success of Germany over the next 5 to 10 years. You'll do fine for the next year or two, but in 5 years or 10 years, you need to do this. Now, how can established businesses worry? How could Google worry about startups? After all, you can't stop Microsoft, Yahoo, BlackBerry. Do you get my point? 10 years ago, there was a completely different regime. Today, there's one set of leaders, and in a decade, there will be others. The competition is so difficult, and I will say that history has shown time and time again that size and past success are no guarantee. I was sure that Xerox and Bell Labs, where I worked for both places, were unslayable giants in technology. But the lead has moved elsewhere. Change comes from where you least expect it. And let me finish by telling the following story. The telegraph disrupted the postal service. Radio and television shook up the news industry. Airplanes ended the age of ocean liners. The next Google won't do what Google does, just as Google didn't do what AOL did. Inventions are always dynamic. This is the process of innovation. Germany has everything that it needs to be a global player in this new digital revolution with a little bit of work. Thank you so very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, and all of you.